Good morning, dear students of class 12. Welcome to this English online learning class. Today we are going to take up lesson 4 of your textbook Flamingo the Rattrap. Before we take up the lesson, let us know a little bit about the author of this lesson, Selma Lagerlöf, 1858 to 1940, a Swedish writer. Stories have been translated into many languages. Universal theme runs around all the short stories, a belief that essential goodness in a human being can be awakened through understanding and love. This story is set amidst the mines of Sweden, rich in iron ore, and it also figures large in the history and legends of that country. The story is told somewhat in a manner of a fairy tale. Let us have a brief introduction of the chapter before we take up this lesson. The story starts off in Sweden and the time is the Industrial Revolution. During this time, many iron workers lost their jobs due to the coming up of machines, and then many others gained jobs working in factories. So it was a time of many changes. The main character of the story is one of the iron workers who lost his job to machines. Presently, he is traveling Rattrap salesman. He sells Rattrap. But this is not, however, a good living. It does not provide him a sufficient to meet his daily needs. One day he decides that life is a giant rat trap, and if you take the bait, you are caught. This idea strikes him, and that same night he stays the night at an elderly man's house, who allows him to stay because he needs shelter. So what happens next in his life? This is what we are going to read in this lesson, the rat trap. Once upon a time, there was a man who went around selling rat traps of wire. He made them himself at odd moments from the material he got by begging in the stores or at big farms. But even so, the business was not specially profitable, so he had to resort to both begging and petty thievery to keep body and soul together. So this man, because he was out of job, he resorted to selling rat traps. He became a rat trap seller, but this business did not provide him sufficient to make his both ends meet. And so he also never bothered to compromise with his principles, and he resorted to begging and even small robbing to keep his body and soul together. Even so, his clothes were in rags, means they were tattered, they were torn. His cheeks were sunken. He gave a very pitiable look, with cheeks sunken, malnutrition, and hunger gleamed in his eyes. You could see hunger in his eyes. So, a very pitiable picture is drawn by the writer of this man, the main protagonist of the story, the rat trap seller. No one can imagine how sad and monotonous life can appear to such a vagabond. Why he is referred to as a vagabond, aimless wanderer? Because he used to go from places to places to sell rat traps which nobody would buy. Who plods along the road? He used to go around the road, left to his own meditations. Most of the time he was lost in his own thoughts. But one day this man had fallen into a line of thought. One day, a very different line of thought struck him, which really seemed to be entertaining. In this moment of sadness, pessimism, he tried to entertain himself with this thought, which gave him some relief. He had naturally been thinking of his rat traps when suddenly he was struck by the idea that the whole world about him, the whole world with its lands, seas, its cities and villages, was nothing but a big rat trap. He was a rat trap seller. He used to sell rat traps. Now he started comparing the world with all its riches as a big rat trap. Now, how this comparison is drawn? It had never existed for any other purpose than to set baits for people. It is setting baits to attract people, to lure people to fall in its trap, just like a rat trap, where baits are put in order to catch the rats. Similarly, the world is offering baits to people to fall in its trap. What baits? Riches, joys, shelter, food, heat, and clothing. So these are the things which world is offering for people to fall in its trap. The worldly possessions. Exactly as the rat trap offered cheese and pork, and as soon as anyone let himself be tempted to touch the bait, it closed on him, and then everything came to an end. The same mechanism in which rat trap works, offering cheese and pork as bait to catch rats. Similarly, the world is offering worldly possessions to man to fall in its trap. And then when any person gets tempted, gets lured by these trap baits, he is trapped, and that is his end. The world had of course never been kind to him. Why he thought like this? Why these thoughts came to him? It is a kind of retaliation, because the world never treated him, people never treated him with respect, nicely. So it gave him unwanted joy to think ill of it in this way. So it gave him a kind of sadistic pleasure to think about other people falling in traps. It became a cherished pastime of his. And thinking about this, he used to derive a lot of pleasure during many dreary ploddings while he was just going about selling rat traps which nobody bought. Life was a great struggle for him, and as mentioned in the first paragraph, he used to even compromise with his principles and indulge in robbing, begging. To think of people he knew who had let themselves been caught in the dangerous snare, and of others who were still circling around the bait. So he derived pleasure seeing other people's falling in traps, and others waiting to be falling in traps. As for him, he was quite secure because he had nothing. So he derived pleasure in seeing other people falling in traps and getting finished. One dark evening, as he was trudging along the road, he caught sight of the little grey cottage by the roadside, and he knocked on the door to ask shelter for the night. So one evening, as he was walking along the road, it became quite late, and so he decided to take some shelter. He knocked on the door asking for shelter, nor was he refused. He never expected that he would be given shelter. But To his surprise, he was not even refused. Instead of the sour faces which ordinarily met him, the owner was an old man without wife or child, was happy to get someone to talk to him in his loneliness. Surprisingly, the person who opened the door was an old man, and he was lonely, without wife or children, and he was too happy to receive him as guest for the night. Immediately he put the porridge pot on the fire like a perfect host. He uh, tried to make him comfortable by giving him meal, not only shelter. He had only asked for shelter, but he was provided with meal also, and gave him supper, the night meal, the last meal of the day. Then he carved off such a big slice for his tobacco roll that it was enough both for the stranger's pipe and his own. So he also shared with him his tobacco. Finally, he got out an old pack of cards and played majolis with the guest until bedtime. So he also entertained the guest by playing with him a game of majolis. The old man was just as generous with his confidences as with his porridge and tobacco. The guest was informed at once that in his days of prosperity his host has been a crofter at Ramjo's iron works and had worked on the land. Nor now he was no longer able to do labor. It was his cow which supported him. Yes, that Bossy was extraordinary. She could give milk for the creamery every day, and the last month he had received all of 30 kroner in payment. So he also shared with him his life, about his life. He was working as crofter in Ramjo's iron works, but now he had left the job as he could not do hard labor because of his old age. Now he sells milk of cow, which gives him money, and he has saved 30 kroner, which he got as payment. The stranger must have seemed incredulous, for the old man got up and went to the window, took down a leather pouch which hung on a nail in the very window frame, and picked out 3 wrinkled 10-kroner bills. So he shared with him his secrets, where how much money he had earned, and also showed him the place where he has kept his saved money. These he held up before the eyes of his guest, nodding knowingly, and then stuffed them back into the pouch. The next day both men got up in good season, quite early morning. The crofter was in a hurry to milk his cow, and the other man probably thought he should not stay in bed when the head of the house had gotten up. So they both woke up. They left the cottage at the same time. The crofter locked the door, put the key in his pocket. The man with the rat trap said goodbye and thank you, and thereupon each went his own way. So they left, crofter for his work and the rat trap his own way. But half an hour later, the rat trap peddler stood again before the door. He did not try to get in, however. He only went up to the window, smashed a pane, and struck in his hand and got hold of the pouch with the 30 kroner. He exactly knew where the money was kept. And so he broke the window, smashed the window pane, and even got hurt. And then he got hold of the pouch and took out the 30 kroner. He took the money and thrust it into his own pocket. Then he hung the leather pouch very carefully back in its place and went away. So the crofter had trusted him by sharing his secrets, and the peddler had betrayed the trust of the crofter by stealing his money, the 30 kroners that he had saved. So we'll stop here for today, and we'll continue with this lesson tomorrow. You are advised to read the text and come up with your doubts if any. Thank you. Take care.